Hey everybody. Today I'm going to talk to you about comparison contrast writing. Particularly, I'm going to show two different styles of comparison contrast writing: subject by subject writing and point by point writing. You'll be tasked with choosing between these two different comparison contrast organizational formats. There's really no benefit to one over the other. Just sometimes they just seem to fit better based on your topic or your argument or just the flow of your words. But there really is no benefit to one over the other. Um, what you'll see, what I have open here, is the same sample outline that was pushed to you guys on Canvas. All right. It was done so with the initial comparison contrast assignment within Canvas. It starts with a sample thesis. Now remember, you can't use this option because these two eras are not adjacent. It's This sample outline is tackling A Rose for Emily by Faulkner, which is a modernist piece, and The Fall of the House of Usher, which is a dark romantic piece. So those two are not connected, whereas your comparison contrast needs to tackle two texts that are connected. You'll see that within this document, I've color coded things. So everything that's in blue is related to Faulkner's work. A Rose for Emily, that's in blue. Everything that's in red is related to Poe's work, The Fall of the House of Usher. Everything that's in purple reflects the two texts together, because red and blue is purple. That was my thinking. So let me read this thesis claim to you, and then I'll showcase the two different formats. So the thesis reads, though both A Rose for Emily by William Faulkner and The Fall of the House of Usher by Edgar Allan Poe detail humanity in its darkest state, Faulkner's darkly satirical work is much more of an illustration modernist writer's attempt to reflect a culture in crisis, while Poe's work is focused on humans' tendency to slip into self-destruction. So, as is standard with thesis claims, you'll have your author and the text, but in this case, you'll have two authors and two texts. So you've got Faulkner in the text, A Rose for Emily. You'll have Poe in the text, The Fall of the House of Usher. The claim states that both of them are showcasing how humanity is represented in these texts as being in its darkest state of being. So that's one of the claims that's being made. The two subpoints, however, are explaining that despite these similarities, there are some differences. That Faulkner's work is satirical, that it's a modernist writer's attempt to explain how his culture is in a state of crisis. Poe's, or the subpoint involving Poe, is explaining that mankind has a tendency to be self destructive in nature. So you'll see that this subpoint in blue representing Faulkner's work, and this subpoint in red representing Poe's work really come together. And despite their differences, they still do come together to create a thematic message in unity. So how do you create a paper that really reflects these ideas? Well, you can organize your thoughts in a couple of different ways. What I'm going to show you now is called the subject by subject style of comparison contrast writing. Subject by subject just means that you start with one subject and then you move to another subject. All right. So if you were to choose a subject by subject organizational format, it means that you would start off with your first text. In this case, it's the first subpoint addressed, Faulkner's A Rose for Emily. You would have two CQAs, right? You'd start with a topic sentence, you'd jump into some appropriate context to help lead into your quote and your evidence, and you'd analyze how the plot of the text and the quote helps to support your claim. At this point, you folks have done many lit analyses and you've mastered the arts of CQA. So this shouldn't be anything too new for you. You'd transition then to a second CQA, detailing how additional evidence from Faulkner's work helps to support your claim, an additional context, quote, and analysis. That's highlighted here in blue. So this is pretty standard literary analysis writing up until this point. What differs is that we're adding a second text to the mix. And in subject by subject writing, when you switch to the second text, you continue onward with a context, quote, analysis style of literary analysis writing. However, you follow up your analysis for Poe with something that's called comparative analysis. So in CQA number 3, with subject by subject writing, you would have CQA 1, Faulkner, CQA 2, additional Faulkner information, CQA 3, talking about Poe. And at the end of your analysis, you would have several sentences that offer comparative analysis. You're connecting this CQA with the ideas from this CQA and from these CQAs in unison. You'd then transition again to CQA 4. Again, centrally focused around Poe and Poe's Fall of the House of Usher, CQA, and then comparative analysis, where you're comparing and contrasting the information within the analysis to the information that's in the CQAs above. So that's subject by subject. And if you, I'm sorry, if there was extra noise in the background, it's because my daughter ran into the room. She was showing me that she acquired some sun chips and she was extremely excited. Who wouldn't be with sun chips, right? But what's more exciting than point by point organizational format? Not much. So let's jump back into this. And I want to show you now the second style that you can choose from when you're writing your comparison contrast paragraph. I have the exact same thesis claim from above, though both Rose for Emily by Faulkner and The Fall of the House of Usher by Poe detail humanity in its darkest state. Faulkner's work is much more of an illustration of a modernist writer's attempt to reflect a culture in crisis, while Poe's work is focused on humans' tendency to slip into self-destruction. All right? Point by point simply means that you're focusing on one subpoint and then moving to the next subpoint and the next subpoint. So here's where it's a little bit different. If you were to tackle a point by point style, your first CQA would be about your first text. In this case, it's Faulkner's A Rose for Emily. Your second CQA would immediately transition to the second text. So in this case, we're looking at Poe and The Fall of the House of Usher. Once again, you have text 1, text 2, and after text 2 in point by point, you would have your comparative analysis to develop the clear connection of the darker themes involved between both texts. From there, you would circle back to text number 1 with Faulkner. CQA 4 would jump to Poe, and after Poe, you would have your comparative analysis. So it's totally up to you. These papers would be very similar in nature. They would get across the same ideas. It's simply where you decide to have your comparative analyses. If it's really woven throughout your paragraph, or if it will be more back heavy, if you'll have your comparative analyses at the end of your paragraph. Now, generally speaking, if this had been a full out essay, we still would have introduced the subject by subject and point by point, but they would have been a little bit different. You either would have had comparative analyses woven within your body paragraphs, much like the point-by-point style. It really would have looked a lot like this as one option. Otherwise, you would have had body paragraphs that were more centered around comparative analysis. So perhaps your first body paragraph would have had no comparative analysis, and your second body paragraph would have. But again, you folks are only writing one body paragraph with 4 CQAs. So you have to decide, do you want to tackle subject by subject, text 1, text 1, text 2, CQA, comparative analysis, CQA, comparative analysis, or do you want to tackle point by point? Text 1, text 2, comparative analysis, text 1, text 2, comparative analysis. If you folks have any further questions, both Mr. Wepfer and I will be available to check in with you during class time via the chat feature or per our individual instructions. We can help you guys, help guide you through this, as it can be a little confusing. However, what's most important to note is that the comparative analysis piece of this paper is what's most important. That's where we will really see your critical thinking and your ability to apply two totally different texts to bring them together while centering around a common theme. Thank you so much for listening. Take care.